It's been almost 2 decades since we started our journey to educate and help you take action so you may better manage your financial future. Our goal is to help you accomplish your life's purpose. This podcast reveals financial tips, strategies, and insights that will help you to set your financial goals and guide you along the way. This is Managing Your Financial Future, brought to you by the advisors at Lucia Capital Group. Managing Your Financial Future, that's the name of this podcast, and this is what we do. Johnny Dean, podcast host, thank you all for joining us. Once again, as our regular listeners and our brand new listeners, we do get emails from time to time from the new listeners, and it's always good to have you folks on board. I want to remind you can subscribe to this podcast, Spotify. That's where you find us, Spotify, and subscribe. You can get the episodes downloaded right there to your device or whatever you happen to listen on, and we love to have regulars. We really do. We can get questions from you folks, and maybe in the next couple of weeks we'll talk, gather some of the questions that we've been getting, email and otherwise. Speaking of answering questions, the guy who does that is here with me, Professor Rick Plum. Hello, Professor.
Hello, hello, hello.
I saw your name in a New York Times crossword puzzle not so long ago, and
really,
the answer was Professor Plum. And I hadn't even seen the clue because it was one of the easy Monday or Tuesday ones that out of the New York Times. And so I
didn't know they were easier on any day. So.
Well, they go from very easy on Monday to really hard on Saturday.
So you switch from pen to pencil about Friday, Saturday?
No. I do this all on, it's digital, so there is no pens and pencils. But yes, and I saw this answer was going to be Professor Plum. And I hadn't looked at the clue because I'd gotten all the crosses and everything. Yeah. So I figured out and I thought, wouldn't this be great if it said something like financial planner and co-host of a podcast? No, doggone it. It had something to do with the game of Clue. Anyway.
I don't think the New York Times knows who I am.
People have known who you are.
Oh, yeah.
Weren't we in the airport not that long ago?
It's happened a couple times, actually.
Yes, and they see Rick
weird.
Plum, and they said, "You're Professor Plum." Yeah. Well, we saw this last week. Somebody was in our lobby waiting to talk to an advisor, and he said, "Hey, wait a minute. I recognize your voice. You're that guy, Professor Plum, on the podcast."
Yeah, thankfully, more people recognize the voice than the face.
Well,
they don't run away screaming with when they hear the voice.
You got one of those plain faces, the type you'd forget in a crowd, Rick. So,
I thought it was the type that'd been hit by a plane.
Well, or punched in the nose. Anyway, I'm glad to have you here. You are a certified financial planner professional. CFP is your designation. And you do that, you plan, you strategize. And I wanted to get into this. Retirement is on my mind. And I kind of started last week. Not for me so much. I got a number of years to go. It is. But with my wife now, she's got a countdown clock. It was like 28 days, 29 days, and something minutes. Anyway.
They have apps for that?
Yeah, she has an app. It's a countdown app.
Yeah.
She has it to June 30th at noon, I think, is when she's...
I'm trying to remember. I ran into somebody who was getting ready to retire, but it was like 6-8 months away. But he had an app that told him exactly...
Down to the second.
Yeah. I'm like, wow.
You can watch the seconds tick down. Yeah. It's nice. But it does get you thinking. And you realize that there's a finite amount of time. Even if you've only got a few years to go, time's ticking away. And sometimes time is of the essence. Now, we talk about planning. We talk about planning for retirement. And I'm talking about this for my wife now. I'm talking about it for me within, as I said before, I'm less than a decade, maybe 7 years, 8 years, God willing. And I have a pretty good idea of where I'm going to be, what I'll need to spend, because I've done these calculations. What I want to talk about for this podcast with you is planning for retirement for somebody who is 15 years away, 20 years away. I mean, circumstances change, Professor Plum.
Right, and usually 15, 20 years away, you still have kids at the house. You may be looking at college expenses. Maybe you're paying for those now. You're paying for extracurricular activity expenses for your kids. And so the budget may be a little tight, and you're saying, how much am I really going to spend? But even you, though, you're 5-7 years away from retirement. You think you have a good idea, but retirement is a transition, and it's tough to really know what you're going to be spending in retirement until you're actually in retirement. Now you can get close, and so you can try to look at it and budget that way. But what I've noticed is that a lot of people will budget their retirement once they're in retirement based on the income that they can have. So they look at their Social Security pensions if they have them, and the reasonable distribution from their portfolios as, okay, this is my income. How am I going to spend it?
So it's sort of like if they'd gotten a job and they say, well, here's how much I'm being paid per year. I will adjust.
Do I buy a Ferrari or do I buy?
I hope at age 65 you're past that.
Are you kidding? That's about when I can afford it, maybe.
Oh, you're not going to do that at age 65, are you?
No, I want to do it now.
Well, now it makes a little more sense, but I hate to say
I'm not that far from 65.
You are true. That's true. I don't know, Professor, just to see somebody who's in their mid-60s or 70s, it just screams post-midlife crisis.
Well, yeah, it can't be midlife crisis because you ain't living to be 120.
Because you're past, but it just screams that. That's all right, but if you can. So the idea is, how do I, what can I afford?
Yeah. And so when you talk about planning, you're talking about the person that's 15, 20 years away. Unless you are an engineer and you've got things so calculated out that you know exactly what you're spending now and you can make an idea of what you're going to spend in retirement. And then you go back and say, well, to get there, I need to save this much money. So you say, okay, I'm going to be spending this much money in retirement. That's going to require a nest egg of X amount of dollars. And for me to get from here to X amount of dollars, I need to save Y amount of money every week, every month. People don't do that. They say, I can afford to save this much money now. And as advisors, we push them to save a little bit more. And then they will get an idea of what they can spend as they get closer to retirement. They talk about, am I spending or saving too much for retirement? Probably not. Unless you're spending and having having no life right now, people are not saving enough to really get there where they want to go with the extra retirement fund that they want to do. The savings is hard because life gets in the way. So people end up retiring on the income that they can have, and they budget around that. But if you want to, we can make all kinds of projections. Now, the problem with making projections 15, 20 years out, say you're making $100,000 right now. Okay, in retirement, there's $7,500 roughly of FICA taxes that you're paying right now out of that $100,000 that you won't have to worry about. So really, you don't need $100,000. You need 92.5. And if you live in a state that has a disability, there's a little bit of state disability tax here and there. Your taxes will be less. You're saving $10,000 a year into your 401k. You don't need that. So now you only need like $80,000 to have the same income you have now. Now, what other expenses won't be there in retirement that you have now? Maybe commuting and things of that nature. So you subtract that out. And you say, but when I'm retired, and this is where I come in, I'm going to be dangerous when I'm retired because with time on my hands, I spend money. I mean, my hobbies, I like Ferraris, fast cars, fast toys. I like things that are not cheap, and my hobbies. So once you get to the income and you say, I'm not going to have these expenses, then you got to add in all the expenses that you are going to have. But they're 15 years away. What's it going to cost 15 years away?
True.
So how much of an inflation factor you add to that? About the only thing in your budget that doesn't have inflation connected to it is a mortgage, if you're going to maintain a mortgage for the next 30 years and you're going to carry a mortgage in retirement. Because that number, if you have a fixed mortgage, that number doesn't change. Your property taxes will change, everything else changes, but your insurance will change. How much is it going to change? So it's very difficult to get a real accurate bead on how much am I going to be spending in retirement when you're 15, 20 years away. Even 4 or 5 years away, it's not easy to get a true bead on what we're going to be spending in retirement, as I mentioned before, until we get into retirement and we know, am I really going to be, racing around the world, in my Ferrari? Or
I would suggest it's if you're 20 years out, it's impossible to get an accurate. You can make some educated guesses, right. So
that's why we look at, okay, then let's focus more on the savings aspect. Let's save as much as we can save without completely crimping our life today. I mean, you got to have life today too. You can't always just save everything for tomorrow. I have met a few people that they scrimped and saved, and their retirement was going to be, this, that, and they were going to do this in retirement. They're going to do they had all these great, wonderful plans for retirement. And about 2 or 3 years before retirement, one of the couple got sick and passed.
Yeah.
Their retirement, they didn't do anything because they were planning for this great retirement. So they didn't do the trips. They didn't do the things. And they saved all their money. They were going to retire a little bit early, but now they can't do, or the remaining spouse can't do what they wanted to do.
They didn't figure on that.
Well,
Who does?
But then on the other side, I've also met people that don't save anything for retirement because they're doing everything today. They've got everything. They're doing everything. They're traveling. They're doing. And by the time they get to retirement, it's like, okay, now we're going to have to scrimp and save because we don't have any money.
And neither scenario is really preferable.
So we've got to find that balance of how much can we afford to save today and save as much as we can today, as efficiently as we can today. Last week we talked about saving on dollar cost averaging and other things, but just making it as automatic and systematic and still having a life. And then as we get closer to retirement, we start getting a little bit more of an idea of what we will be able to. It's almost as if we're looking at when can we retire at the rate we want. Can we retire at 60 at the rate we want? Did we save enough to do that? Or do we have to work till 65, 70 when our Social Security is higher and we've had 10 more years of savings and more potential growth in our portfolio to give us a better income, to be able to have the income that we want in retirement? So the more you save early gives you the flexibility to potentially retire early or have flexibility when you get out to retirement.
Or retire when you want to, more or less.
Right. And I was talking with somebody the other day, yesterday actually. Boy, time sometimes seems like it flies, and this was only yesterday. We've set them up to have a retirement income of X available to them in 3 years. And she was a single lady. What if I don't want to retire in 3 years? Well, don't. I mean, there's nothing here that says you have to retire. You just wanted to make sure that you could retire.
What a wonderful feeling.
It's not about retirement in this situation. It's about financial independence. You have the ability to choose to work or not work as you deem fit with whatever. Right now she's very happy with her job, but I know that in times in the past there have been assignments that have been very stressful that she didn't really want to have to deal with, but at that time she couldn't afford not to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so if that ever happens in the future, she won't have to deal with it in the future.
So not knowing what you're going to spend, because you're going back to somebody who's 15 or 20 years out, not knowing what you're going to spend, you can't really calculate that. So what you're saying is that you like to focus on saving more.
And the good news is with 15 or 20 years out, we can be growth oriented because we have our time horizon and we just use the stock market to what the stock market. You don't have to worry about how much should I have in cash? How much should I have in bonds?
Yeah.
Zero. You got 15, 20 years. Let's just dollar cost average our way into being gazillionaires.
You put the pedal to the metal and the metal to the floor. And exactly. Sally Field. That's to me, that's probably it seems like the more practical way to go. Now,
so that person that's 15 to 20 years out is going to focus more on being efficient as far as how do I do? Should I be doing traditional IRA? Should I be doing Roth IRA? Is the tax deduction on a 401k better than using a Roth 401k? How should I be saving my money? We know that it should be invested for growth. We know that you've got a long-term time horizon. We know you need to do some. Where is there a matching contribution? What can I do to make this work better for me?
You mentioned that financial planners often try, if they can, to get people to save a little more.
We always push. We're very pushy people.
How do you do that? How does somebody who apparently or seems in their mind not to have any extra money left over, what do you do to get them to potentially save more?
Well, it depends on what they have going on. I mean, if they have a 401k that they're not maxed out on, and maybe they say, well, we're saving 6% because that's what they match on. Make it 7%. You probably will not notice that 1% very much. That 1% of your paycheck. Go into your HR when you have your open enrollment and say, move me from 6 to 7%.
So if you're making $100,000,
extra $1,000 a year.
It's 100. It could be $50 a paycheck if you get paid twice a month.
Yeah.
No, less than that actually.
$41.67.
$41 a paycheck.
Yeah.
And you ask them, well, are they really good?
And somebody making $100,000 is probably not going to notice that much. Now that may be if you're making $50,000, it's $20 a paycheck. So
yeah,
but every little bit helps, and it's amazing. Incrementalism works very well because you don't even notice it's happening. The frog in the water, boiling the water, doesn't even notice it until they're cooked. The same thing works with saving.
Yeah,
1% here, and couple months, your next open enrollment, make it 8%, make it 9%. I mean, I can talk about this from personal experience. Years, let's go back a long time. My car insurance bill came due every year. I didn't do it on a monthly basis. I did it on an annual basis. It was like, oh, dang, where am I going to get the money to pay this car insurance? A couple $1,000 or whatever it was. And it's like, and so finally one year I just broke down and said, okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm breaking it into a monthly bill. I'm going to make it automatic. And I took the number, divided by 12, and had that amount of money pulled out of my checking account every month and put into a separate savings account. And then when the bill came due, I knew I had the cash to pay it. And then what I did was I said, well, if it was $200, let's make it $250, make it $300. And I kept pushing. And I kept pushing it.
And you wait and see.
And I didn't push it every week.
No, but you say, did I notice it?
And within a couple of years, I was saving $700-800 a month, up to $1,000 a month just into the savings and building up an emergency fund, building up, a reserve so that when the washer and dryer, went kaput, didn't have to freak out about, oh crap, do we have any room on a credit card?
Yeah.
But we got out of, no credit card debt. And now I had the ability, the discipline to start really saving in other areas. I built up, and it took me a little while to build that discipline, but it has served me well since that point. And I've not had to freak out about those annual or semi-annual bills that come due from time to time.
Well, and I've done that with my property taxes. They used to say, don't ever put it in an impound account.
Well, back then you could earn more on a...
You could get 8% on a CD or something like that.
Now you're getting 0.08 on a CD.
But you know something? Even when I could get 8% on a CD, frankly, it was worth missing out on the extra $30 or $40 I might have made on my property taxes just to have it taken out and I don't have to worry about it.
Well, I had a friend years ago, they used to always get fairly good-sized tax refunds. And I said, dude, you're getting these big refunds. The government's not paying. This is back when you could earn 3 or 4 or 5% on a money market account. The government's not paying you any interest on that money. Lessen your withholdings so that you have more money every month.
And you come out even at the end of the year.
He goes, He had a better rationale for it, though. He goes, you understand, the money of the paycheck goes into the family account, the family's money. The tax refund is mine.
You get away with that. Because my wife would ask me immediately, well,
okay,
what's
the
our
tax
refund?
Is hers. But
let's do it. It's ours,
And to be honest with you, they usually use that money on a family vacation. It was a way of forced saving for them to do something for the family.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Well, the same way, we talked, I think it was last week, about 401k, going to the whole dollar cost average thing. When you talk about raising your savings level, maybe do it incrementally 1%, see if that affected you. The fact that it comes off that it comes off the top and you don't even see it. It just doesn't arrive in your bank account.
You just don't notice it.
You tend not to notice it.
Right, and so just keep pushing it. Whether it's the 401k or it's starting, you just have an automatic. I know a lot of bank accounts now, they waive all your fees if you just start an automatic savings plan to a savings account. And so have $50 a month move from your checking account to your savings account. And maybe that'll help you save some fees too. But it'll also help you start building the discipline to be able to save. Make it 50, then make it 75, 100, whatever the number you start with. Keep pushing it just a little bit every couple months, every 6, 8, 10 months at the most, and just keep pushing it, and you'll find that you've actually got some money. Now, I am presupposing that you don't have massive credit card debt that's at 12, 15, 19, 24%.
Yeah.
Because that is a problem in itself. That's a different world. But we're talking about saving for retirement, and how do we do that? And, well, I guess one of the ways is to figure out how to stop using the credit cards and get out of paying 24% interest, because that's a killer. That's a death nail to any savings.
Well,
plan.
that is a whole other discussion. Maybe we can talk about that at some point. But that is also a drag on the retirement savings.
And that's why with some of the new advents that are coming around with the retirement planning, the automatic enrollment, I actually like that idea. The automatic escalators in the savings, I like that in the new retirement planning rules that are being proposed and being pushed.
Certain states, I think, are doing that.
There are some states that are saying that if you do not have a retirement plan at work, the employer has to allow you to, or actually has to enroll you into an automatic savings plan.
Through the employer or through the state?
Yes.
both, or
one or the other.
One or the other.
If you don't have one, you got to do it the other way.
In other words, if your employer doesn't offer a 401k,
right, they either have to set you up automatically to contribute to an IRA on your behalf, or contribute to the state's IRA, basically.
So if your company has a 401k, but you just don't contribute because you never did,
then you're going to be unaffected by it.
Okay.
You're talking about the new rules that have been coming into play. But a lot of plans now, a lot of companies, a lot of states are saying that you're going to have to, if you have a 401k, there has to be an auto enrollment with new employees. Now, the employee can opt out. They can say, no, I do not want to contribute. I don't want to participate. But the default is when you do all your paperwork to sign up to work for the company, you're doing your W-4, you're doing all the other things. One of the papers is sign up for the 401k.
And you like that?
I do like it because people will start getting their paychecks. They won't even know they're saving. Somebody
should have told me that 35 years ago when
you were washing dishes?
No. I was washing dishes 40
that was a good restaurant
years ago. Oh, it was a darn good restaurant. And when I used to work there, I mean, they used lard in some of these things.
Now, you're not saying it was darn good because you were the cook. You weren't the cook.
I wasn't the cook. I was the dishwasher. But I got free food. Believe me. We always, the cooks always accidentally made extra.
Too much.
Yeah. But when I first started in radio, and I was 22, 23, there was this thing called a 401k. I didn't even know what a 401k was. And they said, well, we'll take a certain amount of money out of your paycheck. And I said, stop right there. I said,
"You're not taking anything out of my paycheck."
You're not taking anything because how much am I making? $600 a month? No, it was more than that. $9,000 a month, $15, whatever it was. It wasn't much, and I said, "Well, I can't afford that. I don't want to do that." So I said, "No, I will never sign up for that."
So you opted out.
Yeah, but of course, yes, I just said, "Don't do it." You had to opt in at that point, obviously, and if somebody had said, "Well, look, just try $50 a month." $25 a paycheck.
Back in those days, 25.
Well, whatever it was, yeah, I could have done
$10.
I could have done it. And looking back, I could have had a decent amount. But
I could have been a contender.
I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum, which is what I am.
Anyway, it is helpful. And this goes back, we've kind of connected the last couple of weeks' worth of podcast discussions into this idea of being able to save systematically.
Right.
If you're 15 to 20 years from retirement, as you said, Professor Plum, it's really almost impossible to judge what you're going to need to spend. Circumstances can radically change.
Very much so.
By the time between age 45 and 65.
So you better set yourself up to have the money to be able to spend whatever it is you need to spend. And it's much easier to have more money than you need than to need more money than you have.
Well, it's better to need me and not know me than know me. What was that?
Better to know me and not need me than need me and not know me.
That's
right. A bail bonds slogan out here.
Yeah, it still runs, I think. We had talked also in a previous podcast, I believe, and I think we've done a couple of Lucia Capital Group weekly features on this. The question was, is it possible to save too much? Now,
yes and no. I would say no generally, unless unless you're just saving so much that you have no life today.
And you go back to that example that you brought up of the person who saved and saved and they never did anything.
You've got to have some life today. You've got to enjoy today because tomorrow's not promised to anybody. And so enjoy today, but set yourself up so that you do have a tomorrow.
Well, and even so, I also look at it from a standpoint of I've got to save. I have to reach this $1 million number, or 1.5 or 800, whatever the number is, and I have to keep working until then. But maybe you don't. Maybe you can retire on something less than that, where if you're working a job you can't stand and you got 5 more years to go.
Well, if you're saving a large portion and you're still enjoying life, then you're obviously living within your means.
Yeah.
And so you have we get out to retirement. There's a lot of people we counsel in retirement that they could spend more money than they're spending. It's just not in them. It's not who they are. Their DNA is not set up that way. After 40 years of living a certain way and not being, spendy, they just don't know how to turn into spendy people.
Well, so using the services of a financial advisor is not just for people who are 65. Somebody who's 35 or 40, who's got a lot of expenses but trying to work. You might work with somebody differently like that, but the advice can potentially be just as valuable.
Well, there's things all along the way that you probably need some help with, whether it's just being understanding the taxes that you're paying and maybe how to be more efficient in that. How do you be more efficient with your savings? How do you set up a retirement? Which type of retirement plan? What type of an account should I be setting up? How should I be handling the kids' education? Should I be putting that ahead of my savings for retirement? How do I go about doing we have a limited set of resources, and we usually have what seems like almost an unlimited set of expenses.
Things that we can, potential expenses, things we have to buy, things we want to buy.
Years and years ago, somebody told me that financial planning was only for the rich.
I've heard that too.
But a rich person has $1 to put towards this need, $1 to put towards that need, $1 to put. They have $1 to cover every individual need. Mm-hmm. The rest of us have $1 that we've got to figure out how to cover all the needs with that $1. We don't have a separate dollar for all those needs. We've got to figure out how to be more efficient.
You got to triage the needs is what you got to do.
And so, yes, financial planning is for the rich. So if you're rich and you need some help, come on in. We'll be glad to help you. But it's also for the rest of us as well.
Yeah, it's not just somebody who's, it can be anybody who's just wants to make sure they can retire when they want to retire. And that It's not something that a lot of 30-year-olds think about, or 35-year-olds, because many times they don't have a lot of money and they're struggling just to pay their bills or get their kids raised or whatever.
My daughter's 27 right now, and she's been saving in her 401k.
This is your youngest.
My youngest one. Yeah, thank you for reminding me that.
I just thought I'd throw this. Yes, my oldest daughter. I can't believe she's 27.
No, my oldest is in their 30s. But
yes,
but she's become almost a resource in her company, because even though she's 27 and most people are older than her, they see what she's doing, that she saves and she has money for this and that. And they're like, well, how did you learn about this stuff? She goes, I got a pushy dad.
Yeah, exactly.
But she goes, whenever they come up with questions, she contacts me, and she basically has turned herself, good, better, and different, into somewhat of a resource for some of the people at work. And she's helping them start getting, because a lot of them weren't during their 401ks. And they didn't even realize they were giving up part of their paycheck, in my opinion.
Oh, sure.
The company is willing to give you 3% more money than you're making right now if you put some money in the 401k.
So wait, is she the Professor Plum of her company?
She's not there yet.
No, but she knows enough to go ask the professor,
she knows where to get the answer,
regular access to, and can come back to work and sound like a genius.
Yeah. She's not trying to sound like a genius. She's just trying to help people.
Heck, I would. You kidding me?
That's not her style.
Hey, folks, I got a good idea. I've come up with this concept called buckets. That's what it's called. Okay, let me draw it out. I'm just writing on a piece of paper.
No, she's talking to mostly 30 and 35-year-olds, so they're not dealing with buckets yet. They're dealing with
they're not
pails that are needing to grow into buckets as they get older. But they need to start creating a savings plan.
Yeah, there's plenty I wish I'd done,
And part of it is, just getting out of debt and stopping over living. I mean, I said before, you got to balance savings and living. But a lot of people, they're not even balancing living with what they're earning.
Well, and there are some people who are in debt through no fault of their own. They had a huge
medical bill. Wouldn't know anything about that.
No, but it does happen. And to somebody who might have had a medical bill with,
and it's hard. And some of them are very large, and, like you said, through no fault of your phone.
They haven't had a chance to save more than much because they're 30 instead of 60.
Thank you.
These things do happen. And we aren't going to get into that now, but there are ways of dealing with that as well.
Right. Yeah. And I will admit I had a very large medical bill, and it scared the living heck out of me. And but luckily I was able to negotiate.
They still ripped you off.
Wow.
I mean, my goodness, one.
Yeah, it was a fairly large number, even the negotiated payoff. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, I won't get into it because it's none of anybody's business.
Still makes me mad. It's why you won't get into it.
Yeah, and I don't want to get you all charged up. So if you are 15 to 20 years from retirement and you want to talk about things like your ways to save more, we can't necessarily get into what you're going to be spending because you don't know.
Right, but we can try to set yourself up so that you can spend what you want to spend when you get there.
Potentially.
But it takes sending money ahead today to be able to do that. And so that means, how can we save? How can we make it efficient? How can we make it automatic? How can we make it easy for you to do this?
And you may be able to save more than you thought.
Yeah.
Just by doing some of the things that we talked about today.
Actually, it is easier than you think. It comes out easier than you think. Once you start, it's very difficult to start, but once you start, it's kind of snowballing.
It really is.
And when you see it happening, you get excited about it happening, and you do want to save a little more.
This is Professor Plum who gets really excited about stuff like this. He loves it. That's why he does it daily. And he also works with a whole team of professionals behind the scenes, certified financial planners, chartered financial analysts, chartered financial consultants, CHFCs. What else do we have?
There's some I can't think of them all. Mostly the key ones are the CFP and the CHFC.
Right. Chartered financial consultant and certified financial planners.
And we have chartered financial analysts backstopping us, helping us with our portfolios.
That's right. So it's all kind of a one-stop shop for this stuff. Lucia Cap is the folks at Lucia Capital Group. That's where Rick Plum is part of that, and the team of advisors that work with Professor to put people's plans together, strategies, and talk to you about saving for retirement. How can you make it from here to there? And once you do get there, how do you make it to the end? It's all part of financial planning. 800-644-1150, our number at Lucia Capital Group, 800-644-1150. Talk to Professor or any of the Lucia Capital Group advisors, who, by the way, work together with Professor, so they've got access to him, just like your daughter has access in many ways. They can at least reach him, 800-644-1150, or you can go online, send an email, talk to somebody, Lucia Cap, LUCIACAP, luciacap.com. And again, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, the Managing Your Financial Future. It's what we do. Not just your future, but your present as well. Talk to you about that. Spotify, you can get our podcast. You can download it on a regular basis. That's kind of like, set it and forget it. You don't have to think about downloading the podcast. It's, as far as I know, it just appears on your...
It automatically shows up in your inbox.
Absolutely.
Or wherever it shows up.
You can dollar cost average this podcast. Spotify, do it there. Out of time. I thank you so much for listening. We got a lot more to come. Season 6 is just booming here. We will talk to you again next week. My thanks to Professor Rick Plum, certified financial planner professional. I'm Johnny Dean for him. I'm the podcast host and moderator. And again, I do appreciate you listening. We will talk to you again next time.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. To the extent that this material concerns tax matters, it is not intended or written to be used and cannot be used by a taxpayer for the purpose of avoiding penalties that may be imposed by law. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. Different types of investments and or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy, including the investments purchased and or investment strategies devised by LCG, will either be suitable or profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. Accordingly, no client or prospective client should assume that the presentation or any component thereof serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from LCG or from any other investment professional. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material was gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. A dollar cost averaging strategy does not guarantee a profit or protection from loss. Since such an investment plan involves continual investment in securities regardless of fluctuating price levels, you must consider your willingness to continue purchasing during periods of high or low price levels. It is important to keep in mind that investments in fixed income products are subject to liquidity or market risk, interest rate risk. Bonds ordinarily decline in price when interest rates rise and rise in price when interest rates fall. Financial or credit risk, inflation or purchasing power risk, and special tax liabilities. Interest may be subject to the alternative minimum tax. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. Roth IRA distributions of principal from a Roth IRA are tax-free. However, any earnings will be taxed at ordinary income rates, and a 10% penalty tax will apply if withdrawn prior to age 59.5 or within 5 years of the date the Roth IRA was established, whichever is longer. Distributions of principal from a Roth 401k are tax-free. However, any earnings will be taxed at ordinary income income rates, and a 10% penalty tax will apply if withdrawn prior to age 59 and a half or within 5 years of the date the Roth 401k was established, whichever is longer. Your investment options are limited with the Roth 401k to those offered by the plan administrator. Charges and fees may be incurred. Rick Plum is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.